All right, ladies and gentlemen. Wow, thank you, Trevor. Welcome back to another podcast, another episode of the Facts Over Feelings podcast. This is episode number 31, I believe. And Trevor, we're back here. Yeah, I know they fly by real quick, and we're back here with more NBA and NFL talk specifically, but just the whole world of sports. And a lot's gone on again. The NBA is finally getting back up and running. I mean, I say finally because my team hasn't played since March. But for these teams in the bubble, I mean, they played just a couple months back. So this is a very, very, very quick turnaround for a lot of these teams. And Trevor, I mean, I wanted to start off by talking about James Harden. And James Harden, there's been some confusion, some circulating rumors the last few days or the last couple weeks about if he wanted to be traded. And the rumors, if proven accurate, seem to say that he wants out of Houston. I mean, he did show up to Houston yesterday for testing to join the team and practicing for the upcoming season. But Trevor, I mean, with all these rumors going around, I mean, do you think, like, if you're James Harden, do you think he should want to be traded? And if so, where?
Yeah, I have a very interesting article pulled up right now about this James Harden stuff. And it does say, you're right, James Harden, according to reports, he was very interested in a trade from Houston, in particular to the Philadelphia 76ers, which is quite interesting, in my opinion, because I think he would fit very well in Philadelphia. However, head coach Doc Rivers was asked about these trade rumors at training camp, and he said, and this is a quote, "You're not hearing them from us. As long as you don't hear them from us, you should feel very comfortable. We like our team, man. I tell you, that team I just watched out there is special. Those rumors, none are coming from us." So the 76ers are denying any trade talks for James Harden. I don't necessarily believe that. I believe Doc Rivers, but I do think I don't know, there has to be, I feel like Elton Brand, the GM, has to be addressing this behind closed doors. Um, but I think it's a good sign for Houston that James Harden showed up. That might lead us to believe that he'll be playing this season.
Mhm.
At the very least, he showed up, so at least there's a chance he'll be in Houston this season. But yeah, this is very confusing. I ultimately think he's going to get traded to Philadelphia. That's just me.
Wow, yeah. So for me, I'm gonna go against you a little bit. I actually think that he's going to stay in Houston. I think he's gonna play out the full season as a Houston Rocket. I think that there's been these rumors. They've been mostly unsubstantiated. I think Harden's just kind of feeding into the rumor mill, the rumor frenzy by, I think he went to like a rapper's birthday party or something. I mean, it wasn't like he was I don't know, like holding out like specifically for a trade. I think he was just kind of, having fun, before the season starts. I'm not really sure. I think at the end of the day, I think the team that Houston has with Harden really isn't bad. I mean, they're going to
I think it's a
probably
very good team, like
they're
really good
probably
team.
they're probably going to make the playoffs. And I wanted to talk about, something else in just a second. But I think that this team is going to be a little bit better than it was last year, for a multitude of different reasons. I just think that Russell Westbrook was a big problem on this team. But before I move on to that, I wanted to address specifically like the James Harden to Philly idea. I think it could work. I think it could work. I really do. If the
I do
trade
too.
happened, which I don't think it will, but if it did, I think it could work. I think Harden on that team, the team is a very strong defensive team, a lot of big guys on that team, and you got a few shooters on that team. I mean, they just traded for Seth Curry, which is massive, a great catch and shoot guy. I mean, and Trevor, let's say they trade Ben Simmons in that deal. I mean, they have Joel Embiid with James Harden there, and you've told me, off the air about Embiid. Like he's a really good all around player. I mean, he
Mhm.
really is. He's a guy that can pretty much do it all. For a five center. And it'd be really interesting to see the two of them together. I think that they can make a big push in the East if he was traded there. However, I don't think he will ultimately be traded.
I mean, either way, I think whatever team James Harden ends up going to, the Rockets or the 76ers, I think they're going to be a shoe-in playoff team, and I think they'll
Mm,
be a top four team in their conference.
interesting.
Um, we forgot to talk about this on the podcast, or maybe we briefly mentioned it.
Hmm.
Houston got DeMarcus Cousins in the
Yeah,
offseason.
we did mention. Yeah.
Okay, we did mention that. They also got Christian Wood. So they have size now. They did lose Robert Covington,
Yep.
but they still have guys like Eric Gordon, guys like Daniel House, guys like Jeff Green, and John Wall is a very, I think, big piece for them because I ultimately, although he might not be as good of a basketball player as Russell Westbrook,
Mm,
I think he's a better fit for that organization
I agree.
and a better fit alongside James Harden. So Houston made offseason moves to keep James Harden there, and I think they're a much more versatile team than they are last year. They can play small, they can play big if they like. But I don't know. Harden just doesn't. I don't know if Harden's just playing into it a little bit. He might
He
be,
might, yeah.
but then why not show up in training camp for however long, you know? So there's definitely some muddiness there. But with the coming days, I'm sure we'll learn more. I'm a big fan of him being traded to Philly. I think that'd be very interesting for the NBA.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, and we can kind of move into this. I wanted to talk about this Russell Westbrook and John Wall trade that happened this past week. I want to talk about it specifically, and I wanted to talk and see, which side do you think won, Trevor? And if you don't mind, I'm just going to say real quick who I think won. I think the Houston Rockets won this trade hands down. I mean, listen, they're both getting paid astronomical amounts. They're both being paid over $40 million and 44 and $47 million for the next 3 seasons. So they're both under contract for 3 more seasons with the player option in the final one for each of them. Westbrook's a year older than John Wall. John Wall's had a lot more big injuries, so that's also a concern. But the thing I like about this trade is the Rockets knew, Trevor. The Rockets knew Westbrook and Harden, they didn't work on the floor. The numbers supported it. Well, I said it for months, and I'll say it one more time so everyone knows. The Rockets were better when Russell Westbrook was on the bench, when he was hurt, when he was out. And we saw that in the playoffs, I'd argue. Westbrook was hurt. You remember he had a hamstring injury. They played pretty well. I mean, they weren't great, but they played well. They were playing well. They were winning games. Westbrook comes back, and I think they only won one game in the playoffs when he came back, if that. And I remember he made multiple mistakes down the stretch. He's too selfish of a player to play with Harden, in my opinion. And I think John Wall is different from that. I think John Wall is a fantastic passer. He averaged about over 10 assists in 3 straight seasons in his prime. And John Wall, we haven't seen him play in a while, but the guy is a very talented player. He will not hold the ball as much as Westbrook did. He will let Harden have the ball more. But Wall is a good distributor, and I think that will help this team. And as long as Wall doesn't take bad shots like Westbrook did, and the volume that Westbrook did, I think this is a win-win for the Rockets. They dump Westbrook, and they get a player who fits them a little bit better, and they got a first-round pick. So I think a good job by the Rockets, in my opinion.
I agree. I do think Houston won the trade. I don't think they really won it by all that much. And here's why. John Wall does have an astronomical salary, just like Russell Westbrook. So you don't win there. You don't lose in cap space, or you don't gain in cap space. Number two, John Wall hasn't played basketball in like 2 years. He didn't play at all last season, and then he missed most of the season before because he had a really bad Achilles injury.
Yep.
And there's a lot of uncertainty with how he's going to be able to play. I mean, I've heard that he looks good. He looks healthy. But look, an Achilles tear is a big injury to come back from. So there's a lot of uncertainty there surrounding John Wall's abilities post Achilles surgery. And
Yep.
number three, I do think Russell Westbrook is a better individual player than John Wall, which is why I think him going to a bad team like Washington will benefit them a little bit, maybe not as much as it benefits Houston getting John Wall, but I do think Washington does benefit from getting Russell Westbrook in Washington, in Washington.
Mm.
Now, I don't know how Bradley Beal feels about it because I know John Wall and Bradley Beal are very close. But Bradley Beal isn't a guy that relies on the ball. He can score in many different ways, which I think will work with Russell Westbrook. And you're right. John Wall's an excellent distributor. The locker room dynamic, everyone knows James Harden's going to be number one. John Wall might be number two, and then everyone else is number three. So I think there's a clear number one in the locker room now in Houston. But overall, I think the trade was pretty fair. I think what makes the difference is that first round pick and John Wall being a little bit of a better teammate. I think that's what separates it for Houston in their favor.
I agree. And before I move on, I didn't talk about the Wizards and the impact this had on them. I mean, I think this is an interesting move. I'm not really sure I'm a fan of it long term because you're paying an insane amount of money to your two
Mm-hmm.
guards. And personally, I don't see them getting past the first round of the playoffs. I mean, maybe if Hachimura and Thomas Bryant, become really, really good players this season. I mean, maybe this season or next, like maybe they have a future. Maybe they can make a deeper push. But as of now, Trevor, I don't see it. I don't see them really making a significant playoff push.
The East
With
is a lot better. I think it would be especially if we expect the Wizards to be a 7 or 8 seed, they're going to have to play a Boston, Brooklyn, Milwaukee. I don't see them beating any of those type of teams.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with that. So we'll see what happens there. I'm interested to see what they do to, build a future. I'm interested to see what they do with these
I
two
do
massive
too.
contracts on the books. But Trevor, with that, I think we can move on from the NBA. We'll have a lot more NBA to talk about probably just next week because preseason will have started and we'll just have a little bit more to talk about. And then the following week, the regular season will begin. So we will have more to talk about in upcoming episodes. But with that, Trevor, we can move on to the next sport, the NFL. As we know, the NFL just completed, I believe, Trevor, week 13 of the regular season.
Sure did.
And there were again a lot of good games. So we wanted to get right into those, dive right into those. And Trevor, I wanted to ask you, what was the first game that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about an interesting game this past weekend, and I'm gonna stay in my NFC West division here and talk about the Giants and the Seahawks.
Okay.
I'm not even gonna address the Cardinals game
Okay.
this podcast. Too much depression.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I wanted to talk about the Giants Seahawks game because I thought this was an interesting. Just the way this game played out was so interesting for me.
It was.
Um, the Giants are a team. I mean, they're not that talented in my opinion. They need some help on offense, but the Giants, they have a team and they found their coach. And I've said it before on this podcast, Joe Judge is the best coach in this division. And I was skeptical of that signing. I was like a special teams coordinator being head coach. I didn't buy it. But then after I saw the Giants, this is how I knew that he was the right fit. The Giants are improving each and every week. You
Mm-hmm.
saw it on the Monday night game against Tampa Bay. They lost that game, but right then and there, I knew the Giants could compete for this division, and they've won 4 in a row. They're
Yeah.
5-7. They have a
Yeah.
very winnable game against my struggling Cardinals next week. And for me, this defense, that defensive line yesterday was incredible. The way they were getting after, or not yesterday, on Sunday, they
Yep.
were getting after Russell Wilson. The way they just held Seattle to basically nothing the entire game except for a touchdown in the fourth quarter, that was really impressive. Now, if they, I'm a little concerned because I do think Washington right now, Washington has a little bit of a better offense, and I think that might carry them one game up above New York.
Yep.
But if New York can find enough offense to carry them these last 4 games, I think they can win this division. And I'll stand by it. I said they'd win this division. I still think they can, but I think they're going to need a little bit more offense to carry them through.
Trevor, this is interesting because you say they need a little more offense, and they won this game with Colt McCoy. I mean, Daniel Jones wasn't playing in this game.
Right.
Now, Daniel Jones will give them more offense, but the issue is, will he keep the ball like in his hands, or will he turn the ball over? We all know Daniel Jones has had insane problems holding on to the football, both in interceptions and especially in fumbles. He's had a really, really big issue with fumbling the football in
Absolutely.
his season and a half in New York. But he'll definitely provide more offense. So we'll see if that can give them a spark. Because their defense is playing very well. I mean, we saw them against Seattle. I mean, this is strange to me, Trevor. Part of me doesn't know how to react to this game because the Seahawks have some strange games like this. They've had this happen a few times where they've kind of just come out flat and they haven't really looked like the elite Seahawks team that I'm used to seeing, that I'm used to watching. And they don't look the same. I mean, they're 8-4, and they really should have two more wins than they do. They shouldn't have lost this game. And there have been a few other games this year that they really had no business losing. It's a strange team. So it's kind of inconsistent, this Seahawks team. And Russell Wilson, I'm surprised that he's been stymied as hard as he has against a lot of these defenses in recent weeks, especially this Giants defense. I mean, this Giants defense, I mean, I hadn't really heard about it being like all this great of a defense, really up until this week. I mean, I knew James Bradbury, who has become an elite corner in this league. He came over from Carolina, is now playing with the New York Giants. He's been absolutely sensational this whole season. And they got Blake Martinez, one of the leading tacklers in football in the previous years as a linebacker. So they have some pieces. But I didn't know this defense was playing at this high of a level. And wow, I mean, they had 5 sacks on Russell Wilson, a mobile quarterback. They had 6 tackles for loss. They played very well. So credit to them. I'll give them credit where credit is due. And if I'm a Seahawks fan, I'm a little nervous, Trevor. I mean, this team looks inconsistent. The offense is supposed to carry this team. This defense is bad. We all know it. The defense actually played pretty well. But this offense, Trevor, looked really worrisome to me. And again, I'm just going into future weeks. I need someone to step up. I mean, they talk about Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf being these all great receivers, this great duo. And I didn't see them show up against one of the worst teams in the league. I mean, at least the bottom half team in the league. So I'm a little concerned if I'm the Seahawks. But the Giants are looking very good. Joe Judge has done a good job turning this, at least the mentality, the culture of this team around in one season.
Yeah, I think he's done a tremendous job. I'm very curious to see how the Giants are going to draft this offseason.
Mm,
Are they going to try and get a quarterback? Now they're 5-7. They're not in the race for Fields or Lawrence.
yeah,
And if they make the playoffs, they're going to drop even further in the draft order.
yes.
For me, I wouldn't bail on Daniel Jones yet. I would give Daniel Jones next season to see what he can do. I think another year under Joe Judge with a little bit more stability will help him. Another year for this offensive line to have some gelling and some
Cohesion.
unison. They
Yeah.
drafted Thomas out of Georgia in the first round this past year, the tackle. So this offensive line is still developing and young. But yeah, I want to highlight the defensive line. Leonard Williams, 2.5 sacks. Blake Martinez, who's a linebacker, had 10 tackles. And I want to talk about one other player. I want to talk about Jabril Peppers. He reminds me a little bit of a Jamal Adams, a safety that can do a lot of other things. I look at his stat line. He had 5 tackles, 4 solo tackles. He had a sack and 2 pass deflections. So that's a guy right there that is being used like a Jamal Adams or a Buda Baker. One of the up and coming young players in this league, I think, is Jabril. And I
Yeah.
want to mention one other funny stat, and this is a little concerning if you're a Seahawks fan. Colt McCoy had more tackles than Carlos Dunlap. I don't think that should happen in a football game, but when the opposing quarterback has more tackles than your starting linebacker, I think that's an issue.
Oh man. Yeah, no, that's definitely an issue with no doubt about it. I do want to point out that so here's the thing. I think if you're the Giants, depending on what really happens this season, where Daniel Jones goes late in the season, I think you really have to look hard at getting a guy like Zach Wilson, quarterback from BYU. I think you really have to look hard at that because again, Daniel Jones just turns the ball over too much for me. He really does. And I need to see a guy who makes the explosive plays but limits the turnovers. And maybe you give him one more season. Maybe you do. But I think that they'll be hard pressed to pass up on a couple of those quarterbacks that'll fall in the late first, early second round for me. So we'll see what happens there. I also think that improving the offensive line is key. Andrew Thomas has struggled throughout the season pretty hard. He did play very well against the Seahawks, did not allow a single pressure. So he's playing much better now, at least this past week, but he has struggled throughout the season. So, we'll see what happens with him. But
Well,
yeah,
I think
but
we need to give these guys time to grow a little bit. I
you're right.
think, as you mentioned, Daniel Jones turns the ball over a lot. Yes, this is also his second coach in 2 seasons. He has a
Same
rookie left.
argument. Yeah.
I don't know if he's a left tackle, but a rookie offensive lineman. They lost their star running back in Saquon Barkley the first week of the season. I would argue that they have a rather weak receiving core. Slayton is eh. Sterling Shepard is eh. Golden Tate is old and not very good. So this team hasn't given the offense at least hasn't given Daniel Jones and Colt McCoy a lot to work with, which is why it's hard for me to bail on them. I would look, I wouldn't be upset if they drafted a guy like, as you mentioned, Zach Wilson or a like Mac Jones, for example, out of Alabama in the first round. But I think it would be a better strategy to build this offense a little bit and continue to build the defense, but focus on getting some weapons on the offense this next off season. You're going to get Saquon back. Allen Robinson's going to be a free agent. I think
Yeah.
if they guy like him, that could be a very dangerous team in the coming years. And the way their defense is playing, their defense can probably keep them in a lot of games where their offense doesn't have to be spectacular. So I'm not ready to bail on Daniel Jones yet. But you make a good point. There are a lot of really good quarterbacks in this next draft class. So it'll be interesting how the Giants approach this.
Yeah, no, I agree. And with that, Trevor, we're going to move on to my first game. And listen, I'll stop talking about my Cleveland Browns when they stop winning games that they're not supposed to win. The Cleveland Browns have been an underdog for weeks now. They've been an underdog pretty much the whole season. Everyone's doubted them coming into this season. They said that the Cleveland Browns, Baker Mayfield's washed. He's not the quarterback that he was drafted to be. Kevin Stefanski can't turn around this team. I mean, look at the coaches they've had in previous years. I mean, all this hype only to not pan out. This is the bounce back season that I envisioned, and even more than that. I didn't expect us to be 9-3 at this juncture. I don't think any real Browns fan would expect us to be 9-3 at this juncture. But here we are. The Cleveland Browns have 9 wins and 3 losses, and they just keep winning. And they beat the Titans in a game they weren't supposed to win. going into the Titans game, I'm willing to tell you that like 75 to 80% of people probably would have picked the Tennessee Titans to win this game. I actually thought the Tennessee Titans would win this game. I didn't think the Browns were going to win this game. The Titans are a formidable team. They're a playoff team. They're a really good team. And the Browns just took care of business. This offense, Trevor, this offense is finally coming into its own. And it's without Odell Beckham Jr., which I think isn't really a shock to me. I don't want to get too much into it, but I think Odell Beckham Jr. just kind of caused Baker he wanted to force the ball to OBJ too much. He wanted to make OBJ happy. He wanted him to be happy. He wanted him to, enjoy his time on the Browns, which is, it's a really nice thing to do, but, it makes it tough as an offense when you're force feeding the ball to a guy when it's not meant to be, right? So it just makes it kind of tough. But this team's flourishing now. I mean, Rashard Higgins, he's playing very well. I mean, he had 95 yards and a touchdown. I really like him. Jarvis Landry's finally playing well these last 2 weeks. He recovered from his broken ribs, and he's playing much better. Nick Chubb continues to be sensational. Trevor, you said it. You mentioned it in previous weeks. You think Nick Chubb is, you didn't really realize fully how good he was, and he really is a sensational running back, and he's been the workhorse of this team, the driving factor. And Baker Mayfield. I mean, this guy has been very, very good, with the exception in the last few weeks, at least. And he hasn't turned the ball over, or he hasn't thrown an interception in over a month. I mean, he only has, I believe, Trevor, 7 interceptions on the season, which is not even close to his 22 interceptions a year ago. He's turning the ball over much less, and he looks like he's making better decisions in the pocket. He's not forcing it downfield when it doesn't need to be. He's throwing it to his check down when nothing's open. And he's just making the right decisions. And I have to credit Stefanski. He needs to be up for Coach of the Year at this juncture. He really does. Stefanski has helped Baker leaps and bounds. He's helped him so much. He's helped him improve immensely from a year ago, even from a few weeks ago. Stefanski's just given him back his confidence, which is massive for a young quarterback. The receivers are wide open, Trevor, on some of these routes. They're wide open. And that does wonders for a quarterback. And I just got to credit Stefanski for the play calling in these last few games. And it's really over the course of the season.
Look, I've been a critic of the Browns. I've said, look, beat somebody other than Jacksonville by 2 points. And the score was 41-35, but it was not that close. Cleveland dominated mainly in the first half, but they dominated the first half, and then they were pretty much on cruise control in the second half. They played a good game. They looked really good. I'm not gonna critique anything because there's nothing to critique. Baker Mayfield was basically perfect. I mean, he didn't miss a throw from what I saw. I will say this, not to take anything away from Baker Mayfield. Tennessee's secondary is a joke.
It is. It's bad.
I mean, there was one play where Donovan Peoples-Jones ran the out and up. And I don't know if Breon Borders for Tennessee is a safety or a corner. His technique there is awful. He gives outside leverage to Donovan Peoples-Jones. So when he makes the outcut, he's open. But what Breon Borders does is instead of following the receiver, his eyes go to the quarterback. So all Donovan Peoples-Jones has to do is cut up, and Breon Borders just loses him. And it's the most wide open touchdown you've ever seen to a fifth-string receiver. So Tennessee was awful, but Cleveland was great. I thought Chubb was really good. I thought Jarvis Landry was great. I thought guys like Rashard Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones, even though I know Higgins had a drop and Landry had a drop in there, I thought for the most part the receivers stepped up. But I am sold on Nick Chubb, and I get why you're so high on him now, because he has it all. He's a physical runner, but he has a second gear. I did not realize that he has a burst like that. He can run past secondary men or corners and safeties. Yep. And he is not, I mean, he's a big guy. He's built like a bruiser, like a physical runner. He is. So he's been incredibly impressive. And I agree with you. Kevin Stefanski should be a Coach of the Year nominee. And if Cleveland finds a way to win this division, he will be Coach of the Year, in my opinion. It wouldn't even be close otherwise, in my opinion. He's done an excellent job. I think Jedrick Wills was a home run as a draft pick for the offensive line. They've done an unbelievable job with the O-line. They're a secondary away from being a really, 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 a contender for a Super Bowl, I think, in my opinion.
Wow.
And Baker looked good. I'm a critic of Baker. I still don't think he's elite. I mean, I think he's
sure.
He had a great game yesterday against a bad defense. You could word it like that. But we're going to see now, because I think people are going to there's going to be some eyes on the Browns now. And I want to see how Baker does against the Ravens and the Steelers in these last few games of the season. We'll see when the pressure's up a little bit, how he performs, the way he looked against those two teams early in the season. So I think the pressure's on for Baker Mayfield, but that was probably his best game of his career yesterday, in my
Wow.
opinion.
And before we move on, Trevor, you're right. I mean, we'll see how he performs against the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Giants. This Giants defense has turned into a formidable defense. So the Browns
Yeah.
have three formidable defenses in the final 4 weeks of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we'll see how
You're
we'll
the
see what
Jets.
happens.
So congrats. You have at least 10 wins.
We do play the New York Jets. That should be a win. Don't jinx it, Trevor. Maybe we'll give them their one win on the season. We'll see. But moving on from this game, I wanted to next go on to your second game, Trevor, which was I believe the Packers and the Eagles.
It was. And this game, regardless of the scoreline, there's a lot more to talk about here because,
Mm,
and it's mainly about the Eagles. And I want to start off with a question. And this is more of a hypothetical question because I don't really know if Ryan and I can answer this.
mm.
But the question is, what happened to Carson Wentz? Where did Carson Wentz was an MVP caliber quarterback a few years ago before he got hurt that season where they won the Super Bowl. And now he's a joke. I don't want to say a joke because that's a little mean, but he's been awful. I don't know what to say. Now I will say this: the O line has been terrible.
Yep.
He got sacked 4 times. Jalen Hurts got sacked 3 times. But here's what I also will say: Jalen Hurts. It looks like he gave them life, and they were down big in this game. I think they were down like 23-3 or something like that, or yeah, 23-3. And Jalen Hurts led him on a little bit of a comeback. I think, and they already announced that he's the starter. I
Yep.
think Jalen Hurts gives this team juice and gives this locker room a reason to believe, at least in maybe not this season, but next season. And look, this season is still not over for the Philadelphia Eagles, right? The NFC East is so bad. We'll see what happens. I don't think they're going to win enough games to get to the playoffs, but I
Yeah.
still think there's a chance that they could, win this division. And I think Jalen Hurts might be the guy going forward. We'll see how he does in the next 4 games. But I don't know, man. I think it was a good decision by Philadelphia to pull Carson Wentz. I think the fans are happy with it. And I think the locker room responded well because the Eagles almost came back in this football game. And Jalen Hurts led that comeback. And I thought he made a couple really nice plays yesterday. The one on the I keep saying yesterday, Sunday. The one on the touchdown where he rolled out of the pocket and made a really nice 25-yard throw to the guy in the end zone. I thought was a really, really good
Yep.
throw on the run. And he can run 5 carries for 29 yards. So he is a versatile dual threat quarterback that you have to plan for and prepare for. One final point on this game. Aaron Rodgers has been fantastic. I think Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes will win MVP this year.
Yep.
I'd be good with either one. I would give Patrick Mahomes the slight edge, but Aaron Rodgers is really making a strong case for it, man. 25 of 34, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
You can just see Green Bay's offense just is taken to a new level when Devontae Adams is in the lineup as well.
Oh, without
Devontae
a doubt.
Adams is a special receiver. Robert Tonyan's been a really nice tight end for them as well. But yeah, I wanted to highlight Aaron Rodgers real fast and
Yeah.
how well he's played this year. I might have disrespected him a little bit when I was on the Kyler Murray train. It's clear now that Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes will be the MVP this year.
Yeah, no, I think there's little doubt in that, barring a late surge from maybe a couple players. But I do agree with you. I think Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes will be the MVP just because they're the epitome of consistency. I mean, Trevor, these guys put up 300 yards in multi-TD games with no turnovers week after week after week after
Mhm.
week, and it's really unbelievable. And we almost take it for granted at times, but they're very good. And I wanted to point out a few players on Green Bay before I get over to Philly. I really think that Green Bay not drafting a receiver or a skill position player in the first round is okay. I think they're set for the next few years. I really do. Devontae Adams, I really obviously love. But I think the addition of Alan Lazard and Robert Tonyan, I think these two guys are going to be really solid. They're going to be very good players. I really like Alan Lazard. I've liked him for a while now. He had a core injury that kept him out for multiple weeks in the middle of the season, but he's back now. And I think that Aaron Rodgers clearly likes him. He throws to him, probably 4 to 6 times a game, and Lazard makes explosive plays, and week after week. And same with Robert Tonyan. This guy, Aaron Rodgers, I couldn't tell you the last time he had a high end tight end. I couldn't even tell you. I don't know if he ever has. So it's been a long, long time. And Tanyan, I mean, this guy, Rodgers has thrown to him in the end zone multiple weeks in a row. And he's also getting 5 to 7 targets a week. from Aaron Rodgers. So this trio of receivers slash tight ends, I really like for Rodgers for the next few seasons. I think that this is really all they need. Now they could go out and get a Will Fuller in the offseason. They could go out and get another receiver to go alongside Adams, but I don't know if they need to. I don't know if those are the holes plaguing their team. I think, I don't want to get too in depth about this, but I think if anything, their defense is the thing to be worried about. It's a little inconsistent at times, and that's the side of the ball that plagues them more than the offensive side of the ball. But they're a great team. They're a great team, and Rodgers might win MVP. So, moving on to the Philly real quick. In this game, they didn't have much. I think, Trevor, it's important to note here. I think when you make a change like this from Wentz to Hurts, there's no going back. You can't go back to Carson Wentz. You cannot. It's like if the Browns bench Baker Mayfield and said we're going with Case Keenum. You can't not go back to a young quarterback like that. Their confidence is shot completely,
Hmm.
at least while they're on that team. Completely shot.
I agree.
Right. So there's no confidence. And then there'd also be no confidence within the organization that quarterback's going to bounce back if you went back to them. So for me, it's a very, they can't look back, the Eagles. They got to just stick with Hurts and they got to go. They got to go. Clearly, Wentz's confidence was gone already. It was just gone. He didn't know what to do. He was not making the reads that he was making prior to his ACL injury. He really hasn't looked the same since then, and it's disappointing to see Wentz really fall off the wagon like this. I feel really bad for him as the I believe fourth highest paid quarterback in the league. But Hurts, I think, is going to be good. I think he could be very, very good in the future. I like his running ability, and he, like you said, he just provides an energy to this team that Wentz didn't have, and that's what happens when you inject a young quarterback like Justin Herbert right into a team, a player like Tua into a team. Now Tua hasn't been as explosive, right, as a guy like Herbert has this year, but he's still helped this team win games, and I think that Hurts will help his team win games as well. We'll see if it'll be enough. I don't think it will be, but I'm glad they made the switch.
I completely agree. And moving on from that game to our final NFL game of the podcast that we wanted to analyze.
Yep.
Ryan, I'll hand it to you to talk about a big upset in the NFL this past week. Not the Redskins, the football team and the Steelers.
Yeah, so this is an interesting game. This is a fun game. I watched this game. It was a great game down to the wire, Trevor.
Mhm.
And the Washington football team, they looked good. They looked really good.
Good.
I like this team. I really do. And we'll see when they can get a quarterback for the future, how they'll look. But right now with Alex Smith, I mean, I'll just say this. They're not in line to get, Fields or Lawrence without a doubt. I mean, this team is probably, in my opinion, like I said earlier, they'll win the NFC East. Now, the Giants are right there with them, but I think the Washington football team is on top and will ultimately prevail. I mean, Smith looked pretty good. He's looking better week after week, slowly gaining confidence. He throws a lot of short passes, but it works for them. It works for them. Long drives, short passes, not a lot of explosive plays. Getting Antonio Gibson, getting hurt is it's going to take a toll on the run game, obviously. But J.D. McKissick is a very good receiver out of the backfield, and that will probably be enough for the time being. And I like their defense. Their defense is elite, Trevor. Their D line might be the best outside the Steelers. It might even be better. I'd argue it's very close. They've made a lot of great plays throughout the entire season, and they played well this past what was it, Monday night, Monday afternoon. Now they didn't have any sacks, but they had multiple tip passes, multiple passes defensed, multiple QB hits, a lot of tackles for
Mhm.
loss, 5 tackles for loss. So this team was all over the place. And Pittsburgh, Trevor, I'm going to talk about them real quick. They're going to make the playoffs. They'll be fine. I still think they're a Super Bowl contender. However, without James Conner, it just shows you the gaping hole in their run game. I mean, there was no run game. Absolutely zero. 14 carries, 21 yards. What is that? That's disgusting. So they need to fix that. They need James Conner back this next week, or at least for the playoff stretch. And they'll probably win the division. They probably will. But I don't know. This opens the door for the Browns if they were to win out. I mean, that's not something that's likely, but it's possible. I think that the receivers lead the league in drops, Trevor. The Steelers lead league in drops. The receiving core does, and that's a problem. Deontay Johnson drops too many passes for my liking. James Washington, Juju have also dropped passes. And it's an issue to me. So they need to fix that. I mean, that's not a mark of a championship team. Sloppy drops, hit both your hands. I mean,
Mhm.
those will eventually be picked. Eventually, one of those will hit off their hands, go up in the air, it'll get picked. So that's a concern for me. But long term, I think they'll be okay. Their offense is elite still, especially with James Conner back in the lineup, and their defense is very good. So
I'm gonna disagree with you here on a couple points, and
Okay.
it's not the Steelers, but I'll agree with you on Washington because, and this is why I'm a little bit scared. I'm almost tempted to pick Washington now to win this division, is because
Mm,
Alex Smith has been a good enough quarterback to win a bad division, and I don't think Colt McCoy or Daniel Jones are good enough to carry offensively a team. Whereas Alex Smith is a game manager. He makes enough throws, he makes enough plays to win a football game. So that's why I do think Washington has a very good shot to win this division as well as the Giants. And number two on Washington, their defensive line is incredible, insanely good. Chase Young has been a home run in my opinion. Deron Payne is excellent. Montez Sweat is excellent. And they didn't get any sacks yesterday, but you're right. They flustered Roethlisberger. They got after
they
him.
did.
They hit him. They batted his passes. You talk about that one of the last plays of the game where I believe it was Montez Sweat who tipped a pass at the line of scrimmage in the air and it ended up getting picked off to basically seal the game.
Mm,
So I completely agree. This Washington defense is really, really good. And I think this defense can keep them in a playoff game against a team like, hypothetically a Tampa Bay or a Seattle or a Los Angeles. I think that defense is good enough to keep them in that game for a long period of time. Moving on to Pittsburgh, though, I've never been sold on Pittsburgh. I've said it multiple times on this podcast. They are a very overrated football team. They have benefited from a lot of close games and an incredibly easy schedule. And I don't even think they're the second best team in the AFC. I
mm.
think they might be the third or fourth best team in the AFC right now. I think you can make a case that Buffalo and Baltimore are better than Pittsburgh. Kansas City is no
What?
undoubtedly better than Pittsburgh.
Really?
Look, Pittsburgh's offense is not elite. It's
Wow.
it's a good offense, right? But they have
Okay.
no run game,
Well,
and they only scored 17 points yesterday. I'm not sold on this team. I love their
mm,
defense, but Roethlisberger, he's been good this year. He hasn't been great. They have good receivers around him, but there's just something missing there with this team, and I think they're incredibly overrated.
wow.
I think if they end up finding a way to lose this division to, it would probably be Cleveland at this point,
Mm,
they would lose their first playoff game. I don't think they win a playoff game. I'm not sold on this team. Uh, I think, as I said, they benefited from a really easy schedule. And here's why I think Baltimore and Buffalo are better than
wow.
Pittsburgh. Quarterback play. I think
Oh
Josh
man.
Allen has taken a step. And I think Lamar Jackson, we saw yesterday, albeit a bad defense. Lamar Jackson he looked better yesterday. And I don't trust Roethlisberger against those two guys. So I think Pittsburgh might be the fourth best team in the AFC right now.
Wow. I need to address this. Listen, you can argue Josh Allen is a better quarterback than Ben Roethlisberger, but listen,
Right now, he is.
you cannot tell me that you'd rather have Lamar Jackson at the head of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense than Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, for the future, sure, he's a lot younger and has a lot more promising of a future, but Lamar has struggled to throw the ball all season. He's regressed in almost every category from last year, which was expected. He had an insane year last year. But
Mhm.
my point is, like, we get caught up in Lamar, but I don't even know if he's a top five quarterback, Trevor. I don't even know if he's
I
probably
agree. He's
he's
not.
probably maybe like 8 through 12, honestly, in his
Okay, but
career.
here's the problem. Here's the problem. Pittsburgh doesn't throw the ball downfield.
I mean, I would disagree with that. I mean, Chase Claypool has caught a ton of deep passes throughout the season, and I
I
mean,
watched that game against Washington. They don't throw the ball downfield. I didn't see
well,
one play where they threw the
see,
ball more than
you're
20
right. They couldn't in that game for the most part, mostly because of that D line. Right? So like I'd be hard pressed to say that this is like a representation of the Steelers offense when they had no James Conner.
I think it exposes
I don't know if
errors.
it exposes. I think if you put Baltimore up against the Washington defense, Baltimore loses the game and it looks just as bad, if not worse. I wholeheartedly
I
believe
don't
that.
know.
Their
I don't
their their passing game will be non-existent. Don't tell me that. I just believe that Marquise Brown and Trevon Boykin and Willie Snead versus Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson,
You
and
get
Chase
that?
Claypool.
I think they play the football team. I think Baltimore plays the football team this season. Or am I
I,
wrong?
I think they do, and well, I think they did they not already play them? Maybe I'm insane, but I don't know. Point being, I really think that the Steelers are not. They are over. They're not an 11-1 team. They're not like Chiefs level, but they're a playoff team. They can win
Yeah, Baltimore beat them by 2 touchdowns, 31-17. They already played them.
And who was the quarterback for Washington at that time? Do you mind? Are you able
It
to
probably
check that
wasn't
for?
Alex Smith. It
Yeah,
was Haskins.
it was Dwayne Haskins. So that there's
And he
all
had a
I.
good game. He went for 32 of 45 for 315 yards.
Yeah, I know, but
No turnovers.
Dwayne Haskins is not. He was so bad that they started Alex Smith like he was the third string. He's the
I agree.
emergency of the emergency. Like this
I
guy's
agree.
not. He's not a good quarterback. He's a bad quarterback.
And
Um,
Washington's a better team now, so that's not apples to
yeah,
apples.
they're a better team now. My point is, I feel like Pittsburgh is being a little hard. Like people are being a little harsh on them. You were being a little harsh on them. They're not an 11-1. They're not a Chiefs level team, but they're a playoff team that can win a few games. I think so.
I think they're the third best team in the AFC. I would take Buffalo over them right now, and I would also take Kansas City. I'm just going to highlight Josh Allen a little bit. Josh Allen looked like an MVP caliber quarterback on Monday night against a beat-up San Francisco secondary. But here's the thing. Washington doesn't have all that great of a secondary either. So for me, I agree with you. I think James Conner affects that offense a little bit, but there's no balance. And I also didn't love the play calling in that game either. They didn't even try to establish the run. I mean, they ran the ball 14 times. They threw the ball 60 times,
Mm.
right? So when you're that one-dimensional offensively and Washington's D line is getting to the quarterback, that limits what you can do. That
Yeah.
limits what you have to make an adjustment. You have to call a play. I'm not a NFL offensive play calling genius, but you have to find a way to make play calls that neutralize a defensive line, if that makes sense. So, with all that being said, I think Washington exposed Pittsburgh a little bit. Look,
Okay.
I'll say it again. I've never been high on Pittsburgh. I don't. There's just
Sure.
something missing with this team.
Hmm.
And we talk about how great the defense is. We talk about how good their weapons. They have three really, really good receivers. And James Conner, when he comes back, is a very good running back. So what does that leave? The offensive line and the quarterback. The offensive line didn't look good, and the quarterback looked okay at best. So for me, there's an issue there with Roethlisberger, and that is why they are not going to get to the Super Bowl this year.
Okay. Yeah, we can leave it at this. I just, I think Washington's playing at a much higher level than they were. I think they're going to win the NFC East because they're playing with more confidence and they're just a better football team now than they were 6 weeks ago. And they've won multiple games. They've won a lot of games recently. I don't know the exact, last 5 or 6 games, how many games they've won, but I'd be willing to bet that they've won like 4 of their last 5 or something
Mhm.
along those lines. So they've been playing much better. We'll see what happens. I think Pittsburgh's good. I don't think they're as good as their record shows, but I also don't think they're as bad as you say they are. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see if Pittsburgh can bounce back next week, and we'll see if Washington can continue their success and win the NFC East. So Trevor, with that, I think we can conclude this podcast and and wrap it up. So thanks everyone for watching, and we will be back next week with another podcast. I hope everyone enjoyed.
Thank you.